Today is July the 17th, 2019. This is the week that was 50 years ago, the 50th anniversary of man landing on the moon. Welcome to the Personal Computer Show. I'm Hank Key and my colleague is Joe King. Do you know who has your personal data? Do you know how Facebook, Google, and Amazon are using your personal data? Is that product you bought from Amazon a counterfeit? You should find out. Our website is pcradioshow.org, and we can be heard each Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on prn.fm, streaming on the Internet, as well as on various podcast hosting sites. Podcasts of the programs available on prn.fm on the Internet and pcradioshow.org. To listen to the live program on the telephone each Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, the number is 641-793-7091. And for those who are listening to the program on demand, you can leave us a message with your question or comments to hank@pcradioshow.org. You can also reach us on Google number 862-800-6805. Start your message with The Personal Computer Show, followed by your message. There is progress fighting ransomware. The FBI releases master decryption keys for G-Encrypt ransomware. In an FBI flash alert, the FBI has released the master decryption keys for the G-Encrypt ransomware. Using these keys, any individual or organization can create and release their very own G-Encrypt decryptor. On June 1st, the developers behind the wildly successful G-Encrypt ransomware announced they were closing shop after allegedly amassing $2 billion in ransom payments and personally earning $150 million. 2 weeks later, in collaboration with Europol, the FBI, numerous law enforcement agencies, and No More Ransom, Bitdefender released a decryptor for files encrypted by G-Encrypt ransomware. While it's not stated how Bitdefender gained access to these keys, it is widely thought that they were able to gain access to the ransomware's command and control servers in order to download the keys. FBI lets anyone create a G-Encrypt decryptor. In an FBI flash alert shared with Bleeping Computer, 3 master decryption keys for the G-Encrypt ransomware were released to members of the FBI's InfraGard program. Bulletins released by the FBI through InfraGard are categorized using the traffic light protocol, which dictates how the information can be shared. This alert title, Master Decryption Keys for G-Encrypt, was released as a white bulletin, which means that the information can be disclosed without restriction. In addition to the master decryption keys, the bulletin explains how the G-Encrypt ransomware as a service operated and related statistics. On June 17th of this year, the FBI, in partnership with law enforcement agencies from 8 European countries, as well as Europol and Bitdefender, released a decryption tool applicable to all versions of G-Encrypt ransomware. The decryption tool can be found at nomoreransom.org. The collaborative efforts further identified the master decryption keys for all new versions of G-Encrypt introduced since July 2018. The FBI is releasing the master keys in order to facilitate the development of additional decryption tools. G-Encrypt operates using ransomware as a service business model, selling the right to distribute the malware to affiliates in exchange for 40% of the ransoms. G-Encrypt was first observed in January of last year, infecting South Korean companies, but G-Encrypt campaigns quickly expanded globally to include U.S. victims in early 2018, impacting at least 8 critical infrastructure sectors. As a result, G-Encrypt rapidly rose to become the most prominent affiliate-based ransomware and was estimated to hold 50% of the ransomware market shared by mid-2018. Experts estimate G-Encrypt infected over 500,000 victims worldwide, causing losses in excess of $300 million. Finally, there is some progress being made. NAS devices are often used to store critical data and backups. but many are exposed to the open internet, and cyber criminals are taking advantage of it. A newly discovered form of ransomware is targeting network storage devices by brute forcing weak credentials and exploiting known vulnerabilities in their systems. Everything you need to know about ransomware, how it started, why it's booming, and how to protect against it, and what to do if your PC is affected. The attacks are opportunistic, with the initial infection coming via unsecured internet-facing ports and the use of brute force attacks to bypass weak login credentials. Network-attached storage devices make appealing targets for cyber criminals dealing in ransomware because they're used to store critical data and backups. But despite this, the devices don't tend to be equipped with security software. Publicly exposed systems and devices expand overall attack surfaces and increases the potential for vulnerabilities to be exposed and exploited. Ransomware attacks are going to continue as a way for threat actors to attempt to monetize their efforts and to disrupt operations for other objectives. Users are presented with a ransom note informing them that all their data has been locked and directing them to a Tor website to make the ransom payment in Bitcoin. Users are also warned not to tamper with the encrypted data. Researchers suggest spelling errors in the ransom note indicate that those behind the ransomware aren't native English speakers. In order to protect NAS devices against ransomware attacks, it is recommended that users restrict external access to them so they can't be found from the outside internet. It's also recommended that security patches are applied and strong credentials are employed to protect systems from brute force attacks. Amazon plans to retrain 100,000 employees. The training, which will be voluntary, expands upon Amazon's existing programs and initiatives. The idea is to help Amazon employees progress into more advanced jobs or even new positions outside of the company. It will be available to 100,000 workers by 2025. Amazon is calling the plan Upskilling 2025. Workers could use the training to transfer between positions that, without the training, they might not have been qualified for. For example, warehouse workers in fulfillment centers could be trained for technical roles in IT, and non-technical workers could be retrained as software engineers, even if they have limited technical background. Another training initiative, Amazon Apprenticeship, offers paid intensive classroom training and on-the-job apprenticeship within the company. Amazon is also emphasizing its growing cloud business with a training program that helps employees operate in the booming tech business. While many of our employees want to build their careers here, for others it might be a stepping stone to different aspirations. The Amazon head of HR said that in a prepared statement. We think it's important to invest in our employees and to help them gain new skills and create more professional options for themselves. Amazon's initiative comes as robots and artificial intelligence are advancing and more capable of replacing human jobs. Machines are expected to displace about 20 million manufacturing jobs across the world over the next decade. According to a recent report from Oxford Economics, a global forecasting and quantitative analysis firm. That amounts to 8.5% of the global manufacturing workforce being displaced by robots. Amazon is also fighting for employees during one of the tightest labor markets. Upskilling 2025 could help attract more employees because of future opportunities they might not have been previously qualified for. The training also helps Amazon retain workers. Some of the fastest growing jobs are in skilled Amazon areas that Amazon is training for, including software developers, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Through its Upskilling 2025 pledge, Amazon is focused on creating pathways to careers in areas that will continue growing in years to come, including healthcare, machine learning, manufacturing, robotics, computer science, cloud computing, and more, the company said in a statement. The company is also dealing with growing internal displeasures among from some fulfillment workers. Recently, the company's plan to spend $800 million to speed up deliveries for Prime members sparked tension between the company and the leaders of a major workers' union. They said the new shipping initiative could be dangerous for workers and are struggling to keep up with demand. Amazon was also criticized last April after it revealed the median pay for its global workforce, including part-timers, was about $28,500 in 2017. The company said in October that it would raise its minimum wage to $15 per hour for U.S. employees. Everybody knows about the trade war with China. According to U.S. Census Bureau figures, as of May, America had imposed tariffs on more than $250 billion of goods, around half of all its imports from China. China has sought to retaliate in kind, imposing tariffs on $110 billion of goods, but Beijing has limited scope for widening its tariffs further as Chinese imports from the United States are only $120 billion. What's China doing, and is it working? Chinese state media has been hinting that Beijing may seek to maneuver against the U.S. and its Western allies in an area that could hurt them badly, specifically technology. According to official news sources in China, the People's Republic is planning a new technology security management system which might bring in new controls not of China's imports but of its exports. China's top economic planning organization, the National Development and Reform Commission, has been assigned to design the details of the plan. So far, little other information has been released. The move would seem to foreshadow a response to the U.S. move placing a ban on Huawei technologies, barring the colossal Chinese networking vendor from buying American technology and compelling the Shenzhen-based giant to remove U.S. components and software from its products. Well, is it working? I don't know. TV prices are plunging, and it's all thanks to tariffs. Data from WitsView, a division of TrendForce, found that even though the U.S.-China trade war was temporarily put on hold, TV brands are still experiencing something of a pricing crisis because of the perceived threats of tariffs impacting their product. However, TV prices aren't going up. Instead, according to the firm's latest report, the threat of tariffs and subsequent delay in their implementation has driven TV prices down at an even quicker rate. As TrendForce pointed out, display brands and retailers are preemptively stockpiled during the second quarter because of fears that TVs could face a 25% tariff during the third quarter. And now, because that 25% tariff never actually materialized, warehouses and stockrooms are flooded with displays that now have to be cleared out to make room for new inventory. The firm's data found that, in particular, prices for 32, 65, and 75-inch TVs are being impacted the most. For 32-inch sets, prices have fallen around 10%. 65-inch TVs have seen roughly 25% price reductions, and 75-inch sets are falling in price by just under 10%. Meanwhile, the 55-inch TVs are remaining relatively the same in price. The result there, according to TrendForce, is that the 65-inch models are now the most popular choice among American consumers. With no signs of improvement in the market conditions, the firm expects pricing to continue its downward trend. Just how much lower brands and retailers will be able to go through remains to be seen. But for a market that already has a horrible profit margins, the last thing the TV segment needed is what's happening right now. Who's profiting from all this? The U.S. consumers. Presenting the IT Pro Series by Benjamin Rockwell on robotic process automation.
Technology in the workplace is abundant. This is Benjamin Rockwell, and now I'm going to cover some of the different things that we deal with work technology and how it mixes with the personal. Now, this week, I'm going to talk about robotic process automation. And you might be thinking, what, robots in my home? Well, I mean, if we're going to have robots in the office, we'll have robots in my home. And unfortunately, unlike the Jetsons, we don't have robots in our home. Most of us don't, at least. I know I don't. But I am looking at one of the different things that's out there, and that is automation. Now, we think of this, it's called robotic process automation, and sometimes robotic process engineering. But there are a number of different things that happen that can be automated, that we can move forward and we can change the shape of how we're dealing with technology, and we can leverage technology to do the mundane tasks, especially those mundane business tasks that we aren't really interested in doing over and over and over again. Back a number of years ago, I worked for a company which had a need. They had a situation where closing of the books happened actually once a week. Now, we close the books once a month. This is a sort of a financial thing. You close the books at the end of the month to see how you did for that month. You assemble all of that data, of course, over the year, and then you see how you do for the year. You get your profit, your loss, your different areas which need improvement, and so forth. But the way our company worked, we decided we wanted to close weekly. Why weekly? Well, because we wanted an update on how the particular location was doing every week. Are we on target to meet our goals? And if we're not on target, how can we adjust things? How can we move things around to make sure that we do meet our goals? So that meant we had to close, doing something called a trial close, or just basically it's just an assembly of all of the information. If we were to close the month right now, what are the numbers? So it gave us an idea of where we were going, how far we were towards our goals. Now, where does the robotic process automation come in? To close the books with a particular software, the financial software that we were using, well, it meant that we would have to sit down, a person like myself, fairly adept at the computer and technology, would sit down and would run all of the different processes that were involved to close the books. How long did that take? About a day. If anything went wrong, it would be into Tuesday. Yeah, we did that the very first of the week. So it would be all day Monday and partway into Tuesday. That's not a great way to start the week. That's not a great way to spend the week, with 20+% of your time being spent waiting for the computer, tapping in a couple more keys, doing a couple more things. Yes, and you work your way slowly through all of this. It got uncomfortable. It got really bad for the people who had to do that. So they came to me, they said, can we automate this? And then the answer was yes. So you may be familiar with a sort of a junior version of robotic process automation if you've ever done an Excel macro. What is a macro? It basically goes through and it does a number of updates, maybe 5, 10 different little key presses all combined together. And when you do those 10 different key presses and you automate them, well, you make your life a little bit easier. In this case, automating, yes, roughly 6 hours worth of work. Other benefits come from automating these kinds of things. Whenever we're putting together this automation, well, we're also removing out any chance of manual error. We're removing any chance that somebody's going to put in a 5 instead of a 6 and all of the numbers turn out wrong. Or they press this wrong or that wrong, whatever it is. So there are so many things that we can automate. There are so many things around the business area that we can automate. We can process invoices. We can automatically set up so that all of the purchase orders are handled. Whatever it is, you can set up things like onboarding new employees. You can set it up so that If somebody does X, then this report over here, Y, will print out. Or maybe you just set it up so that the top 10 reports that the boss asks for every week, well, they're printed out every Monday morning. He might even receive these in his email automatically, all cleaned up, all ready to go, exactly the way he likes them. He doesn't have to wait for you to get in. He doesn't have to wait for anybody to turn on computers. It just happens. So how do we apply this in our own lives? How do we apply this for ourselves? And the answer is simply this. Get involved with automatic direct deposit. Most of us have that. Get involved with your automatic bill pay. Go through and make sure that you're doing everything you can automatically to ease your life. Cell phone bill? Yes, it's paid automatically. Electric bill? Automatically. The cable bill? Whatever it is. The mortgage? You can set this all up. You can set it up so that everything is automated and it moves all of the different dollars and pennies and whatever it is that needs to be done to the right place. It makes your life easier. And yes, it's just a very simple form of robotic process automation. This is going to be a big thing in the business world. There are a lot of companies looking for this, and there will be even more in the coming years. This is Benjamin Rockwell. Back to you, Hank.
Thank you, Benjamin. The Apollo 11 mission occurred 8 years after President John F. Kennedy announced a national goal of landing a man on the moon by the end of the 1960s. Apollo 17, the final man-moon mission, took place in 1972. The American effort to send astronauts to the moon had its origin in an appeal President John F. Kennedy made to a special joint session of Congress on May the 25th, 1961. I believe this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. At the time, the United States was still trailing the Soviet Union in space developments, and Cold War-era America welcomed Kennedy's bold proposal. In 1966, after 5 years of work by an international team of scientists and engineers, the National Aeronautic and Space Administration, known as NASA, conducted the first unmanned Apollo mission, testing the structural integrity of the proposed launch vehicle and spacecraft combination. Then, on January the 27th, 1967, tragedy struck at Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida, when fire broke out during a manned launch pad test of the Apollo spacecraft and the Saturn rocket. 3 astronauts was killed in the fire.
American manned programs culminated in 1969 with the first man landing on the moon, using equipment launched by the Saturn V rocket. The project's main success came in 1969 when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon as part of Apollo 11. Apollo 11's crew members were Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. Apollo 11's departure date was July 16, 1969. Apollo 11, the first manned mission to land on the moon, landed on July 20, 1969. During this mission, American astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became, respectively, the first 2 men to walk on the moon. There have been 6 total manned missions to the moon, the last of which departed the moon in 1972. There were also several unmanned missions to the moon from 1976 and 2013.
Apollo 11 was the spaceflight that first landed humans on the moon. 3 days. It takes about 3 days for a spacecraft to reach the moon. During that time, a spacecraft travels at least 240,000 miles, which is the distance between Earth and the moon. The man in the moon is made up of various lunar Maria. These vast, flat spots on the moon are called Maria, or seas, because, for a long time, astronomers believed they were large bodies of water. The total cost of the Apollo program reported to Congress was $25.4 billion. 6 missions landed men on the moon, beginning with Apollo 11 in July 1969, during which Neil Armstrong became the first man to walk on the moon. Apollo 13 was intended to land. However, it was restricted to a flyby due to a malfunction aboard the spacecraft.
The week that was, 50 years ago. 2 Americans landed on the moon and explored its surface for some 2 hours Sunday, planting the first human footprints in its dusty soil. They raised the nation's flag and talked to their president on Earth 240,000 miles away. Both civilian Neil Armstrong and Air Force Colonel Edwin Buzz Aldrin reported they were back in their spacecraft at 1:11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time Monday. The hatches closed and locked, Armstrong reported. Millions on their home planet watched on television as the pair saluted their flag and scoured the rugged, rocky surface. The first to step on the moon was Armstrong, 38 years old, from Ohio, and his foot touched the surface at 10:56 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and he remained out for 2 hours and 14 minutes. His first words standing on the moon were, "That's one small step for man and a giant leap for mankind." 20 minutes after he stepped down, Aldrin followed. "Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful," he said, "a magnificent desolation." He remained out for 1 hour and 44 minutes. Their spacecraft, Eagle, landed on the moon at 4:18 p.m., and they were out of it and on the surface some 6 hours later. At the end, Mission Control granted the extra time on the lunar surface. Armstrong was given 15 extra minutes, Aldrin 12. Even while they were on the surface, the seismometer that they installed to study the moon's interior was picking up the shudders created by Aldrin as he hammered tubes into the lunar crust to take soil samples. Earlier, Mission Control reported that a laser beam shot from Earth to the moon had been reflected back by a small mirror set on the surface by the astronauts. But scientists at Lick Observatory in California later said the initial test had failed because the beam was 50 miles off target. There were humorous moments in the awkward climbing out in the spacecraft. When Aldrin backed out of the hatch, he said he was making sure not to lock it on the way out. Armstrong on the surface laughed. "A pretty good thought," he said. Once back in the spaceship, they began immediately to repressurize the cabin with oxygen. They stowed the samples of rocks and soil. "We've got about 20 pounds of carefully selected, if not documented, samples," Armstrong said, referring to the contents of one of 2 boxes filled with lunar material. The minutes behind were unforgettable for them and for the world. The moments ahead were still full of hazard. Monday at 1:55 p.m., they are scheduled to blast off from the moon to catch up with their orbiting mothership above for the trip home. President Nixon's voice came to the ears of the astronauts on the moon from the Oval Room at the White House. "This has to be the most historic telephone call ever made," he said. "I just can't tell how proud I am, because what you have done, the heavens have become part of man's world. As you talk to us from the sea of tranquility, it inspires us to redouble our efforts to bring peace and tranquility to man. All the people on earth are surely one in their pride of what you have done, and one in their prayers that you will return safely." Aldrin replied, "Thank you, Mr. President. It is a privilege to represent the people of all peaceable nations." Armstrong added his thanks. Armstrong's steps were cautious at first. He almost shuffled. "The surface is fine and powdered, like powdered charcoal to the soles of the foot," he said. "I can see my footprints of my boots in the fine sandy particles." Armstrong read from the plaque on the side of the Eagle, the spacecraft that had brought them to the surface. In a steady voice he said, "Here man first set foot on the moon, July 1969. We came in peace for all mankind." As in the moments he walked alone, Armstrong's voice was all that was heard from the lunar surface. He appeared phosphorescent in a blinding sunlight. He walked carefully at first in the gravity of the moon, only 1/6 as strong as the Earth. Then he tried wild gazelle-like leaps. Aldrin tried a kind of kangaroo hop, but found it unsatisfactory. The so-called kangaroo hop doesn't seem to work as well as the more conventional pace, he said. It would get rather tiring after several hundred. In the lesser gravity of the moon, each of the men, 165-pounders on Earth, weighed something over 25 pounds on the moon. Armstrong began the rock picking on the lunar surface. Aldrin joined him using a small scoop to put lunar soil in a plastic bag. Above them, invisible and nearly ignored, was Air Force Colonel Michael Collins, keeping his lonely and patrol around the moon for the moment when his companions blast off and return to him for the trip back home. Collins said he saw a small white object on the moon, but didn't think it was a spacecraft. It was in the wrong place. Back in Houston, where the nearly half-moon rode the sky in its zenith, Mrs. Armstrong watched her husband on television. "I can't believe it's really happening," she said. Armstrong surveyed the rocky, rugged scene around him. "It has a stark beauty all of its own," he said. "It's different, but it's very pretty here." They took pictures of each other, and Aldrin shot views of the spacecraft against the lunar background. In a world where temperatures varied some 500 degrees, from 243 degrees above zero in sunlight to 279 below in the shadow, the men in the spacesuits felt comfortable. Aldrin reported, "In general, time spent in the shadow doesn't seem to have any thermal effects inside the suit. There is a tendency to feel cooler in the shadow than out in the sun." It is reported that more than half of older U.S. workers, those 50 and over, get laid off or pushed out of career positions on the way to retirement, and few ever again make what they did before these setbacks. IBM has eliminated more than 20,000 U.S. employees ages 40 or over in the last 5 years. The findings aren't the product of a leaked document or a single source tip. They're in large part the result of information received from more than 2,000 older workers who filled out questionnaires and answered more than 18 months of follow-up emails and phone calls. Some of these workers said they'd been forced out of IBM not only by layoffs, but also through forced retirements and deteriorating work conditions that prompted them to quit. To answer these questions, the government-funded Health and Retirement Study, or HRS, working with the Urban Institute, a Washington think tank, and urban economist Richard Johnson. The HRS is funded by the National Institute of Health and the Social Security Administration, designed and fielded by the University of Michigan. It is widely recognized by economists and others as the premier source of quantitative information about older U.S. population and has been used in thousands of research studies. Since 1992, the HRS has followed a nationally representative sample of about 20,000 Americans from age 51 until the end of their lives. It refreshes the survey every 6 years by adding a new group of people in their early 50s. It interviews everyone every 2 years. The latest round of interviews was in 2016, providing up to 24 years of data on the original respondents. Among the questions the HRS asks in each survey wave is whether a person is working for the same employer or she or he reported in the previous wave. If not, the survey asks detailed questions about the circumstances of the person's departure and the consequences that resulted from it. The HRS also asks a series of questions about retirement, including whether people who are working plan to retire, and if so, when, and how retirees view their departures from work. They partnered with the Urban Institute and Johnson to use HRS data to examine how voluntary or involuntary are the big changes that occur in old Americans' work lives. To ensure accuracy and protect against drawing overly negative conclusions, they made a series of conservative assumptions about what types of workers to examine and which kinds of job departures to consider. They looked primarily at workers who enter their 50s working full-time and full year and who have been with the same employer for at least 5 years. HRS data and economic studies show that these workers, whom economists describe as having high labor market attachment, are the least likely to encounter employment problems. If they did have such problems, then those with more sporadic work patterns and their attachments almost certainly are having them as well. To make sure that they were looking at as long a stretch of people's work lives as possible, they included only HRS respondents whose records start in the early 50s and who they also can see when they're 65. Layoff decisions are made by employers and are experienced as involuntary by employees. By contrast, retirements and quitting jobs are generally seen as decisions employees make voluntarily. But because of what was learned with the IBM story, they want to take a closer look at these. So in every case where the HRS said someone retired or quit, they look at whether their answers to questions about the circumstances of their departures indicated deteriorating working conditions such as reduction in pay, benefits, or hours, changes in work location or content, or problems with superiors. Check, check. With supervisors. They look at whether people unexpectedly retired, counting instances where people said in one survey wave that they expected to keep working for years to come, but in the next survey said they retired. To avoid overcounting, they only counted instances in which the respondents' retirements were at least 2 years short of their expected retirement dates. Finally, in all cases, they only considered job departures that resulted in very damaging consequences, at least 6 months of unemployment or a 15% or more drop in earnings from pre-departure levels. People are unlikely to make such changes of their own accord. After sorting job departures in HRS sample into voluntary and involuntary, they sorted the involuntary departures into those likely driven by employers and those resulting from personal forces such as poor health or family problems. To check that their results was not the product of a statistical fluke, they ran the same tests as they did for strongly attached workers, for those without full-time jobs or long tenure with an employer. They also varied our seen at 65 requirements. They look at variations between people of different sexes, races, ethnicities, and among those with varying amounts of educations. In all instances, they came up with similar results. To provide more details of methods and results, they co-authored a research report with Johnson, How Secure is Employment at Older Ages, which is posted on the Urban Institute website. The underlying data and sensitivity analysis are also available. Again, the information is posted on the Urban Institute website. Taken together, Johnson said, the evidence in our story and our report calls into question the notion that most seasoned workers who are strongly attached to the labor force can remain at work and earn stable income until they choose to retire. The government funded this very detailed study on ageism, but is Congress planning to do anything about it? Presenting Marty Winston on debugging your biosphere.
You know, there's a new Terminator movie coming in November, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is in it. So it would seem unfair or premature to characterize him as an ex-Terminator. But when it comes to your most common need for debugging, maybe an exterminator is part of what you need, or maybe it's something else. It depends in part on what kinds of bugs are bugging you the most, and that's what this segment is all about, debugging your biosphere. Let me start with the parts where exterminators are your best bet. Not necessarily a sure thing, nothing is, but generally better than what you can do yourself. Think about pests that don't fly, like ants and spiders and roaches and bed bugs. A spray may be okay. It depends on the spray and you and how you handle it, and sometimes on whether there are kids or pets in the house. For me, I'd rather go to a pro and get an exterminator in. Before we're done, though, I'll tell you one way that dealing with things that aren't spiders can help convince spiders to relocate. Most of my focus is on flying things that can sting you or make you itch. Stinging, biting things. Oh, speaking of things, I got in a thing called, and this is its name, a bug bite thing. It's a cylindrical piston with a plunger and a reversible end. When something bites you, you use this 3 times at the site of the bite to suck the insect venom or saliva out of your skin. The earlier you catch the bite, the more effective it is, but I've even used it on bites that were a day or 2 old and had some relief. I now have bug bite things handy in 3 or 4 places around the house. It works for me. But like you, I'd rather not have the bugs there to bite or sting me in the first place. So let me start with mosquitoes. I'll be going into technology countermeasures in a minute, but first, like the poster in the barracks used to say, know your enemy. Know why mosquitoes bite? First, it's only the females that bite because, second, they need our blood to form their eggs. Ah, the circle of life. They're equipped with a highly sensitive multi-sensor targeting system. I heard one guy thought he was funny. Well, this guy said that if you could hold your breath until November, mosquitoes won't be a problem. Well, that is how they first spot you, your breath when you exhale. Mosquitoes can sense CO2 from up to 75 feet away. And the closer they get, the more they're nearby, the more it's just a trip to pick up dinner at the drive-thru. They can sense the heat and humidity around our bodies. They're attracted by the lactic acid and octanol in our breath and our sweat. You may want to look up octanol. It's O-C-T-E-N-O-L, octanol. Most of us are budget burgers to mosquitoes, but if you have type O blood, you're a Delmonico. Also, if you're wearing darker clothing, especially black, you're a brighter target. Not sure why. It may be the slightly higher temperature. Know what else is a brighter target, despite being technically black? Well, to humans anyway, and that's black light, UV. Most mosquito killer technology is based on ultraviolet UV light as one of the primary lures. They may also include other ways to produce CO2 or chemical lures or other things that mimic, well, the scent of a human. That said, most of the gear out there is not all UV. It includes some emission in the blue spectrum, not because that has any impact on the mosquitoes, but because it lets people know for sure that the gizmo is plugged in and its lamp is still good. I've been looking at several gizmos, some in the category of zappers and some in the category of trappers. The simplest ones have a blue LED. Not sure if there's any UV emission or not. They also have a strip of sticky film or paper. Being naturally polite, as the mosquitoes arrive, they stop to wipe their feet, and then they can't leave. I hope you know I'm kidding about them being polite. They really hit the sticky stuff either by accident as they fly by or, more often, when they land to investigate. These are traps. I'll get into traps on another scale in a minute. About half a century ago, home bug zappers were a big-time fad, and they're still around. There's always something in the middle to lure the bugs in. Often more than one kind of lure. UV lights and chemical lures are the most common. Surrounding these lures are 2 concentric conductive screens with a modestly high voltage between them. I say modestly high, you don't want to touch it. An outside grillwork keeps hands from touching both screens. You might be able to touch one, not the other. Better if you can't touch either one. Those screens, of course, are close enough to each other that if something as small as, say, a mosquito, if something that small was to touch both screens, that would immediately translate into a brief burst of light, the sound of a zap, and the reduction by 1 of the local mosquito population. And back then, half a century ago, every backyard bug zapper became something of a light show. It would provide its own little bit of summertime entertainment. Sometimes the zaps came faster than the popping of corn. Sometimes it was more of an occasional bloop, fireworks-like salvo, but it always got our attention and often earned a grin. These days, there are big plug-in units that can cover an acre-size yard and smaller battery-powered units that can cover something the size of, say, a patio or a campsite. Some units are deliberately quieter, but remember, one of the central functions of a bug zapper is to lure the mosquitoes in, and maybe the gnats as well, meaning if you want to take even more advantage of their ability to lure those little pests, you'll want to position the unit at least 20 to 25 feet away from the house. Today's household bug zappers tend to be modestly priced. For example, next time you're in a Home Depot, check out the range of models from Stinger Products. Their executives were very helpful when I was doing my homework for this segment. They make zappers, but I also got a lot of help from Dynatrap, which, as its name implies, specializes in trappers. They sent one of their largest models and one of their smallest for me to review, and both work like this. There's a fluorescent ultraviolet tube on the top that also glows blue. In addition to UV, the tube also produces a little heat. That's 2 lures, and there's a third. The housing has a titanium dioxide coating, which under the influence of the UV and the heat produces carbon dioxide. Just like exhaling, about halfway down the cylindrical body, there's a fan. The fan is horizontal, the airflow is vertical. Below the fan, a pair of flaps that the airflow keeps open. They rapidly close if the airflow stops, and below that, a screened cage. This isn't just about mosquitoes. It attracts and traps wasps, hornets, gnats, moths, almost every kind of biting or stinging or pesky insect that is normally attracted to people. I've never seen it trap a ladybug or lightning bug or butterfly. It's not that it knows, it's that the bugs know. It looks like a people that they like to bite, they're going to be there. But the bad bugs that it does trap are destined to starve to death. That takes about a day. On our wooded lot, I tend to see about half an inch a day added to the trap. One more plus for traps. The things that you do to clear flying pests from an area, think about this, also take away a source of prey, of food, for spiders. So like all living things, you may see the spider moving vans pull up to help them relocate to another place where they're less likely to go hungry. Okay, there may not be any spider moving vans or pickup trucks or minivans or station wagons. Maybe they just get up on their 8 little legs and take a hike. I'm not sure how it is they make the trip, but if you're curious, there's one way to check, because they're spiders, so you know they're always on the web. Please, hold your rim shots for the end. Seriously, spiders are on our side when it comes to reducing the population of flying pests. So seeing them relocate to that perimeter around the areas that trapping can cover can extend the effectiveness of insect traps. Wondering if you can both trap and zap? Sure. Zapping brings instant gratification because you don't have to be right on top of it to see and hear it working. Trapping is quiet as a whisper, but it gets more kinds of pests. Either one, or both, will need 3 to 6 weeks to make any consequential dent in the local pest populations. The key is the egg layers. Which brings up 2 important questions. How soon in the season should you start, and how late should you keep going? And let's also answer a third question. Why? In the southern states and warmer climates, you may want to start as early as Groundhog's Day in February. As those early populations awaken, the sooner you can rid them of egg layers, the fewer total population, the fewer egg layers you'll have to deal with for the rest of the year. In the north, think April Fool's Day for the same effect. And note this, keep them going until October or November. I can give you a more complete explanation, or you can just focus on these 3 words: West Nile virus. If you need to brush up on why that's significant, see what your search engine has to say about it. West Nile virus. But let's also go to a less scary reason. It's possible we're dealing with nature, so nothing's guaranteed, but it's possible that continuing to use any effective insect population reducer well into fall can give you a huge head start on the next spring's battle with the bugs. 2 things can happen that can help. One is eliminating females before they go dormant for the winter so they won't be there to celebrate the next spring with an egg-laying party. The other is eliminating females before they can lay their last batch of eggs for the year, which is also a whole crowd of kids that won't be there to bug you next spring. Bottom line, whatever you do to eliminate pests, keep doing it until they're absolutely out of play for the rest of the year. Trap products are an easy way to monitor that, so is the sound of zaps. Next time, I'll address one small part of a subject about which most of us have more fear than information: cyber warfare. It's now, and it's real, at least at a skirmish level. And I'll talk about an important amendment to Hank Key's perennial advice to back up, and identify a backup back door that can lead to a frightening degree of general disruption everywhere. It's especially relevant to company computers, but it potentially touches everywhere. You will want to hear more, so be here.
Thank you, Marty. Public service announcements. Computer club meetings in the New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut tri-state region. The computer clubs have random access sessions at each of these club meetings. If you have any questions or need for technical advice, the club members are more than happy to assist. There is no such thing as a dumb question. All these computer club meetings are open, free to the public. Brookdale Computer Users Group has a presentation on two tools, Hard Disk, Sentinel, and iCloud. Presentation on Thursday, July the 25th. Meeting time is 6:45 p.m. at the Middletown Library Lodge Meeting Room, 55 New Monmouth Road in Middletown, New Jersey. The Amateur Computer Group has their general meeting Friday, August the 2nd. Meeting time is 8 p.m., and they meet at the Scotch Plains Rescue Squad, located at 1916 Bartle Avenue in Scotch Plains, New Jersey. The New York Amateur Computer Club meets Thursday, August the 8th. Meeting time is 7 p.m., and the presentation is How to Configure and Set Up a Home and Small Office Network. I will be giving that presentation. It will be at NYU, 32 Waverly Place, Silver Building, room 414, and that's in Manhattan, New York. The Long Island Macintosh Users Group will be meeting Friday, August the 9th. Meeting time is 7 p.m., and they meet at the Old Westbury campus of the New York Institute of Technology, otherwise known as NYIT or New York Tech, at the Harry J. Scher Hall. The Kings Bite Computer Club meets Tuesday, August the 13th, and the meeting time is 7 p.m., and they meet at the Park Plaza Restaurant, 220 Cadman Plaza West in Brooklyn, New York. The Princeton PC Users Group meets Tuesday, August the 27th. Meeting time is 7 p.m., and they meet at the Mercer County Library in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. The Danbury Area Computer Society has no planned meeting for August, but they will meet September the 3rd at the Danbury Hackerspace, and their meeting time is 7 p.m. at 158 Main Street in Danbury, Connecticut. And we hope to see you at one of these meetings. Our website is pcradioshow.org. We can be heard each Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on prn.fm on the Internet. Podcasts are available from all major podcasting host sites, as well as our website, pcradioshow.org. If you have any questions for us or commentary on any of our feature segments, just send us your email address with your telephone number in which we can call you at a convenient hour for playback on the program. If you have any questions for us, just send us your email addressed to hank@pcradioshow.org. There is no such thing as a stupid question. In the meantime, stay in touch and remember to do regular backups. I'm Hank Key, and on behalf of Joe King and Michael Horowitz, we thank you for listening. Stay safe and healthy until we meet again, same time, same station next week.